I was born under the scorching sun of Virginia, not on soft featherbeds, nor to the lulling songs of a mother's cradle. My home was a cabin smelling of dampness and sweat, and my cradle was my mother's calloused hands, rocking me after an exhausting day in the cotton fields. From birth, I knew my fate was the earth. Not the earth that yields harvests, but the one that consumes lives. My childhood games were not with dolls, but with clumps of dirt imitating cotton bolls. I knew the taste of slavery even before I learned to walk. By the age of 4, I was already fetching water. By 6, I was bending my back alongside adults, feeling the sun burn the skin on my neck. I dreamed of only one thing: sleep. Deep, dreamless sleep that would wash away the fatigue and pain, even if only for a few hours. And I also dreamed of rain. It was always salvation. It washed the dirt from faces, cooled the skin, offered a respite, and it drowned out the screams. Every day was like the last, like drops of one endless rain. The smell of freshly plowed earth mixed with the scent of sweat and fear. Early in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to turn pink, we were woken by the piercing clang of a bell. It didn't just mark time. It struck at our nerves, at our souls. For breakfast, corn porridge, sometimes with bits of something unclear, but we ate greedily without discrimination. We needed every morsel of strength to endure that endless day. The days dragged on endlessly, from dawn till dusk, under the scorching sun or pouring rain. We bent our backs in the fields. Cotton, that word was in our hearts, on our hands, in our dreams. White fluffy, so innocent-looking, yet how much pain it brought. My fingers, once delicate, became rough, pricked, and bleeding. My nails broke, leaving splinters that became inflamed and festered. But the pain wasn't just in the body. It was in the eyes of the other slaves, dull, empty. It was in their silence, in their rare, broken conversations about something long past, about someone lost. In the evenings, as the last rays of the sun faded beyond the horizon, we returned to our cabins. The fatigue was so intense that sometimes our legs wouldn't obey. We ate dinner, remnants of what the white folk had, or what we managed to grow in our tiny gardens. And then conversations. Quiet, barely audible whispers, so the overseer wouldn't hear. Stories of home, of freedom, of those we had lost. Songs. Melancholy, full of longing, but there was something else in them too. Hope. Through these songs seeped resilience, an unconquered spirit. We sang of the sky, of the stars, of the river that would carry us away from here. These were our rituals, the only thing left of our former lives, of our souls. I remember the smell of fried fish that my Uncle Tom would bring when he managed to catch something in the river. He always shared with everyone. And those moments when we sat in a circle, eating, listening to his stories, were the only times we felt like people, not just hands for labor. One day is etched in my memory particularly sharply. The day my heart first felt something more than just fear and exhaustion. His name was Elijah. He was a new slave, bought from a neighboring plantation. Tall, with eyes full of fire, and a smile that could melt ice. He wasn't like the others. He didn't have that brokenness that ate us from the inside. He looked straight ahead, without a hint of subservience. And that was dangerous. I noticed him when he first came out to the field. He moved differently, with some kind of inner strength. Our gazes met, and in that moment, the world around me seemed to freeze. I felt a wave of warmth spread through my body, and then a slight tingling in my fingertips. This was something new, unknown to me. We started meeting in the evenings, under the cover of darkness, when everyone else was asleep. He told me stories of his former life, of the family he had lost. His words were like a healing balm to my wounded soul. In him, I saw not just a man, but a reflection of my own long-forgotten freedom. We spoke of escape. It was a dangerous dream that could cost us our lives, but we clung to it like a drowning person to a straw. One day, as we were picking cotton, a scream rang out. It was a young slave named Sam, who had tried to run away. He was caught, and the overseer, Mr. Johnson, a man with a face carved from stone, began to beat him. The sound of the whip tore through the air, and each strike echoed with pain in our hearts. We stood there, gritting our teeth, eyes cast down, afraid to look up. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall. We couldn't show weakness. Elijah stood beside me. His fists were clenched, and anger burned in his eyes. I knew he was ready to rush to help, but I grabbed his hand, squeezed it tightly, showing him that it was useless, that it was suicide. Sam screamed, and then his voice faded. He lay on the ground like a broken doll, and we continued to work as if nothing had happened. This incident left a deep wound in each of our souls. It showed how fragile our lives were, how merciless the world we lived in, and it strengthened our resolve to escape. Whispers of escape spread among us like wildfire. Careless words, whispered in the dark, could cost a life. We gathered in secret, under the cover of night, in an old abandoned cabin on the edge of the plantation. We planned every step, every breath. My friend, Sally, who was born on the plantation and knew all the paths and roads, drew a map on the ground. She spoke of rivers, of forests, of the stars that would show us the way north. Elijah gathered provisions, bit by bit, at night, risking being caught. My role was to distract. I had to draw the overseer's attention, using my singing ability. My voice, which had always been my only possession, was to become our weapon. We chose a night when the moon was young, and the sky was scattered with stars. That evening, I sang. I sang as I never had before. My voice soared over the fields, over the cabins, over the planter's house, filling the air with longing and hope. The overseer, Mr. Johnson, came to the window, listening. He always loved my songs. There was something in them that calmed him. He didn't know that this song was our farewell. While he listened, Elijah, Sally, and 2 other slaves who had decided to escape with us slipped past the guard dogs, bypassing the sentries. I finished the song, feeling my heart pound in my chest like a caged bird. I waited. I waited for his footsteps, his shout. But he was silent. I understood that they had gone. I stood by the window, looking at the road they had taken, and prayed to all the gods I had heard of in childhood. And then everything went wrong. Chaos erupted in the morning. It was discovered that the slaves were missing. Dogs barking, overseers shouting, hooves pounding. I stood in the field, picking cotton, trying to feign indifference, but inside everything trembled. Suddenly I saw them. They had been caught. Elijah, Sally, and the 2 others who had run with them. They were being led back, shackled in chains. Their faces were swollen, bruised. But in Elijah's eyes, I saw something more than pain. I saw accusation. He thought I had betrayed them. My heart clenched. How could I? He didn't know about my plan, about my risk. They were all brutally punished. Elijah was whipped so severely that his back turned into a bloody mess. I heard his screams, but I could do nothing. I stood in the field, silent, clutching a cotton stem in my hand, until its white fluff was stained with my blood. And Sally, she was sold south, to other plantations, from where no one ever returned. Before she was taken away, she looked at me. In her eyes, there was no accusation, only pain and farewell. She knew I hadn't betrayed them, and I knew she would never forget me. My life after that became even harder. I saw Elijah every day. He stopped talking to me. His eyes, once full of fire, were now empty. He thought I had betrayed him. That was the most terrible punishment. I couldn't explain the truth to him. I couldn't reveal my role, because then I too would be revealed, and that would mean death, or something worse. I didn't know how long I could bear it. I felt something dying inside me. Dreams, hopes. I worked to exhaustion, trying to drown out the pain in my heart. I dragged heavy sacks of cotton, my hands were torn, and my back ached from the endless strain. I saw other slaves punished for the slightest transgression, for working too slowly, for spilled water, for a wrong glance. One old man was beaten almost to death for falling asleep in the field. His wife wept, embracing his lifeless body, and we stood afraid to even breathe. Moments of humiliation were part of our daily lives. We were told we were animals, that we had no souls. We were forced to take off our shoes so the overseers could pass without soiling their footwear. We were merely things. I often ask myself, why? Why us? Why must we suffer so much? I looked at the stars at night, trying to find an answer in them, but the sky was silent. I prayed to God, if he even heard us, slaves, to give us strength or take us to him. In my soul lived two thoughts, two fires. One, the pain and despair that consumed me from within, and the other, a spark of hope that I carefully guarded. It whispered to me that one day everything would change, that this pain would not be eternal. One day, as I was cleaning the planter's house, I accidentally overheard a conversation. Mr. Johnson, the overseer, was talking to the planter about an old chest that he had brought from Africa. He spoke of some old, long-forgotten curse that supposedly haunted his family. I didn't pay it much mind, but the image of the chest stuck in my head. A few weeks later, I saw the chest. It stood in a back room, locked, covered in dust. Something inside me whispered that this chest was the key to something, to some secret. I began to devise a plan. I knew that Johnson, though cruel, was also very superstitious. One day, during a thunderstorm, when the whole house was in a panic from the thunderclaps, I took advantage of the moment. I crept towards the chest. It was locked, but I found an old, rusted key that hung on the maid's keyring. I opened it. Inside were old papers, some amulets, and a small wooden box. I quickly took the box, closed the chest, and returned the key to its place. Inside the box, wrapped in yellowed cloth, lay a small medallion. Etched on, it was a symbol I had seen before, but couldn't remember where. It was a sign my grandmother used to ward off evil spirits. I felt a shiver run through my body. This was not just jewelry, it was a charm. The next day, I fastened the medallion around my neck, hiding it under my clothes. On that very day, something strange happened. While working in the field, the overseer, Mr. Johnson, suddenly collapsed. He convulsed, and his eyes rolled back. He screamed as if something was strangling him. All the slaves froze in horror. I stood aside, watching him. Something within me said that this was not just an illness, it was a curse, the very one he had spoken of. A few days later, he died. His death was a shock to everyone. No one could understand what had happened, but I knew. I felt that it was somehow connected to the medallion. After his death, another man became overseer, a softer man than Johnson. He wasn't as cruel, and this gave us a small respite. Life didn't become free, but it became more bearable. And also, I began to notice that Elijah started looking at me differently. In his eyes, something like curiosity appeared, and then tenderness. One evening, as we sat by the fire, he came over to me. He didn't say a word, just took my hand and squeezed it tightly. In that moment, I understood that he had forgiven me, or, at least, had begun to forgive. Our secret meetings became more frequent, a necessity in this world of oppression. We hid in an abandoned barn, where the dust of ages mingled with the smell of old hay, and moonlight filtered through the cracks, painting ghostly patterns on the floor. There, away from prying eyes and the sound of the whip, we found refuge for our souls, a place where for a moment we could forget our enslaved lot. His touches were a tenderness long forgotten, and my own, once rough from labor, now responded with such fragile sincerity. In Elijah's embrace, I felt myself not merely an object, but a living woman whose soul could breathe freely, even if only in stolen minutes. It was a merging of two tormented hearts, finding in each other not only carnal comfort, but an unseen connection that gave us strength to live on. "Maggie," he whispered one night, as the first gleams of dawn barely colored the sky, and the air was still cool. His voice, hoarse from lack of sleep and inner tension, sounded like both a sentence and a promise. "Let's run. Tonight. I know the way. Through the swamps. Through what no one would dare to cross." My heart, already accustomed to constant fear, skipped a beat, but this time from a sudden, sharp hope. Swamps, it seemed like madness, certain death, teeming with snakes, alligators, and endless traps capable of swallowing a person without a trace. Yet in his eyes burned such determination, such unwavering faith, that all logic receded. This wasn't just an offer to escape. It was our last desperate chance at life itself, at its true, free taste. We escaped that same night when the plantation sank into a deep, deceptive sleep. Under the cover of thick, impenetrable darkness which enveloped every bush and tree, we slipped past the sleeping guard dogs, whose rare whimpers seemed deafening in the silence, bypassing the indifferent shadows of the trees that silently watched our desperate flight. There were 4 of us, myself, Elijah, and 2 other slaves, a brother and sister, whose eyes burned with the same thirst for freedom and who trusted us, entrusting their lives into our hands. Every step was a test, requiring superhuman effort. We moved slowly, with extreme caution, following barely visible trails that Elijah remembered from childhood, for he was born in these lands and knew every stream, every ravine, every treacherous patch of bog. The swamps greeted us with cold dampness, a thick, suffocating smell of mud and decaying leaves, and our feet slipped, sinking into the viscous, engulfing mire. Damp branches lashed our faces, leaving scratches, and overhead, like ghosts from nightmares, moss-draped trees loomed, creating an oppressive, eerie atmosphere. We heard the squelch of water, mysterious rustles and whispers. Every sound seemed an immediate threat, and our hearts tightened with a premonition of disaster. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, and then a piercing cry of an unknown marsh bird rang out, chilling our blood and reminding us of the fragility of our situation. We walked for hours without stopping, our backs aching, and our legs refusing to obey. But we kept moving, for to stop meant to surrender. I felt hunger twisting my stomach with an unbearable cramp, but the fear of being caught was stronger, suppressing all other sensations. We feared every rustle, every snap of a twig underfoot, imagining the silhouettes of pursuers behind them. One night, we heard the barking of dogs, approaching at a frightening speed. These were hunting dogs, specially trained to find fugitives. We ran, sinking into the quicksand, clinging to tree roots, feeling our hearts beat so loudly that it seemed the overseers pursuing us would hear it. We hid in dense reeds, holding our breath, feeling the cold water seeping into our clothes and mosquitoes biting exposed skin, but we lay perfectly still until the barking faded in the distance, leaving behind only an oppressive silence. Our meager food supplies were running out, and we ate what we could find: bitter berries, edible roots that we had to dig out of the mud. One day, Elijah caught a fish with his bare hands, and we ate it raw, feeling each morsel give us a tiny but vital dose of strength. Our bodies were exhausted, utterly worn out, but our spirits remained unbroken, for we knew this was our only chance to gain true freedom. After 7 days and 7 nights of endless treks, when our physical strength was at its limit, we finally saw it, the river, wide and calm, flowing inexorably northward. This was the Ohio River, not merely a geographical boundary, but a symbolic frontier separating the nightmare of slavery from the faint hope of freedom. On that other bank, as legends whispered, awaited an entirely different world, and this thought, like the last sparks of fire, nourished our exhausted bodies and spirits. We found an old, half-submerged boat, appearing as worn out as we were. Elijah, despite his complete physical exhaustion, began to repair it, patching holes with mud and branches, for we had no other way. At dawn, when the fog still lay over the water, concealing the outlines of the banks, we pushed off, rowing with all our might, not allowing ourselves to look back. The cold wind bit at our faces, but it seemed not just a gust of air, but the breath of freedom, filling our lungs with a new, unknown strength. When our feet touched the other shore, this land felt like the firmest and most blessed I had ever known. We fell to our knees, unable to hold back the surging tears, tears of relief, tears of joy from reaching our desired goal, but also deep tears for all our losses and endured sufferings. We were free. I looked at Elijah. His eyes shone with a new, previously unseen light, and he hugged me so tightly that it seemed my bones would crack from the force of his embrace, symbolizing our finally achieved unity. Our story did not end on this bank. It only began, taking a new, unexplored turn. We passed through incredible trials, but survived, and in the new place we met people who, risking their own lives, offered us a helping hand and shelter. We gradually learned to read and write, acquired new crafts, worked the land, but now on our own free land, managing our own destiny. We began to tell our story to others, to those who were just beginning their difficult journey to freedom, sharing our experiences, and warning them of dangers. Elijah, driven by an inner duty and the realization of his own mission, became a guide for other slaves, repeatedly risking a return to bondage, but understanding that his help was invaluable. I, meanwhile, sang of our sufferings, of our indomitable struggle, of our eternal hope, and my voice, once a mere whisper, now transformed into a mighty song of freedom, echoing across the expanses of a new life. Sometimes I look at the stars. They are so distant, but they are always there, silent witnesses to the past, present, and future. They have seen everything that was, and they will see everything that comes next. My voice no longer whispers. It sings of what was and what will be. And I know that one day, when my time comes, this song will not fall silent. It will be picked up by other voices, other hearts, because freedom is not just a word or a dream. It is an unquenchable flame that burns in every soul, inspiring resistance and faith in a better future.